What happens when a marriage collapses not in private, but in front of millions, and the third person in the story refuses to stay in the shadows? The story of Melody Holt, Martell Holt, and Arionne Curry is not just reality TV drama. It's a real-time lesson in betrayal, denial, and the long-lasting consequences of choices made behind closed doors. For years, viewers of Love and Marriage Huntsville watched Melody Holt build what looked like a solid marriage, a growing family, and a successful business empire alongside her husband, Martell Holt. On the surface, everything appeared aligned. But beneath the polished image, cracks were forming, cracks that would eventually split the entire foundation of their relationship. Those cracks had a name: Arionne Curry. At first, Arionne was only a rumor, a name whispered in blogs and comment sections. Melody denied knowing the full extent. Martell denied everything altogether. Like many reality TV scandals, it began with vague accusations and defensiveness. But what made this situation different was that the truth didn't fade, it escalated. Martell Holt repeatedly insisted that the allegations were exaggerated, misunderstood, or outright false. Yet over time, inconsistencies in his statements began stacking up. Each denial seemed to create more questions. Meanwhile, Melody was left navigating not only marital betrayal, but public humiliation, forced to relive her pain season after season as viewers demanded answers she herself was still processing. Then Arionne Curry stepped forward. When Arionne began speaking publicly, the narrative shifted dramatically. No longer just a rumor, she positioned herself as a woman telling her side of a story she claimed had been hidden. Interviews, social media posts, and carefully worded statements painted a picture of a long-term relationship, not a one-time mistake. For fans, this confirmation was explosive. For Melody, it was devastating. What made the situation even more painful was how responsibility was distributed. Instead of Martell being solely held accountable, public judgment spread outward, scrutinizing Melody's reactions, her decisions to stay, and eventually her choice to leave. At the same time, Arionne faced her own wave of criticism, labeled by many as the villain without nuance or context. But here's where the story becomes more complex. Arionne Curry's public presence raised uncomfortable questions. Was she exposing the truth or prolonging the damage? Was her voice an act of empowerment or retaliation? Some viewers empathized with her, believing she was manipulated and silenced. Others accused her of rewriting history to justify involvement in a broken marriage. Martell, however, remained the constant center of chaos. Despite overwhelming evidence, shifting timelines, and emotional fallout, Martell often framed himself as misunderstood. His refusal to fully accept accountability created a cycle where wounds never healed, only reopened. Every new statement, every interview, and every on-camera moment kept all three names tied together long after the marriage officially ended. Melody's evolution became the most striking contrast in this triangle. Rather than engaging in prolonged public battles, Melody shifted focus. She leaned into motherhood, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. Her strength was quiet but firm. She didn't need to over-explain her pain. Her progress spoke for her. Many viewers saw her transformation as proof that survival doesn't always require revenge. Arionne, on the other hand, continued to defend her narrative, often responding to criticism directly. This kept her connected to the story, but also trapped within it. The more she spoke, the more the public demanded, and the internet is never satisfied. What this triangle reveals is something deeper than infidelity. It shows how reality TV blurs moral lines, turning real trauma into entertainment. It shows how women are often pitted against each other while the man at the center avoids lasting consequences. And it shows how truth, once public, can never be fully reclaimed. Today, Melody Holt stands as a woman who rebuilt herself in front of an audience that once doubted her. Arionne Curry remains a polarizing figure, seen by some as honest, by others as destructive. And Martell Holt's legacy remains deeply complicated, defined more by his choices than his intentions. The real tragedy isn't just the affair, It's that all three will forever be linked to a story none of them can fully escape. As time passed, the dynamic between Melody Holt, Martell Holt, and Arionne Curry stopped being just a personal matter and became a public case study in accountability. Fans began to notice a pattern. Every time the conversation focused on Martell's actions, the narrative somehow shifted toward the women involved. Melody was questioned for staying too long. Arionne was attacked for speaking at all. Martell, however, often positioned himself as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of the chaos. This imbalance frustrated many viewers. Why were the women forced to explain, justify, and defend their pain, while Martell repeatedly minimized his role? Reality TV thrives on confrontation, but this situation exposed something darker: the normalization of deflection. Instead of closure, audiences were given cycles of blame, denial, and emotional exhaustion. Melody's breaking point did not come from one betrayal, but from the realization that respect had disappeared entirely. Her decision to finally walk away wasn't impulsive, it was strategic. She chose peace over proving a point. That choice resonated deeply with viewers who saw her reclaim control in a space that once stripped her of it. Leaving wasn't weakness, it was self-preservation. Meanwhile, Arionne Curry's continued presence online kept the controversy alive. Some fans argued that her speaking out was necessary, that silence would have erased her experience. Others believed that repeatedly revisiting the affair only deepened wounds that needed time to heal. The truth likely exists somewhere in between, where unresolved emotions meet the unforgiving nature of public platforms. What complicated matters further was the involvement of children. Once a child entered the narrative, the stakes shifted permanently. Viewers became divided not just emotionally, but morally. Many questioned how much of this story should ever have been shared publicly. At that point, the drama was no longer just about adults, it was about lifelong consequences. Martell's image never fully recovered. Each attempt to reframe the past only reminded audiences of unresolved accountability. Redemption requires acknowledgement, and without it, growth feels performative. Fans noticed that while Melody evolved, Martell remained reactive, responding to criticism instead of rising above it. The emotional contrast between Melody and Arionne also became clearer over time. Melody chose silence where necessary. Arionne chose voice. Neither approach was wrong, but the internet treated them as enemies, rather than women navigating the aftermath of the same man's choices. This is where the real lesson lives. Society often pits women against each other while excusing male behavior as complicated. Melody Holt and Arionne Curry were never the true conflict. They were collateral damage in a situation driven by dishonesty and ego. Today, Melody's brand, confidence, and independence tell a story louder than any interview. Arionne remains a figure of debate, her narrative unfinished, her reputation permanently linked to a moment she cannot undo. And Martell Holt stands as a reminder that charm without accountability eventually collapses. This story didn't end with a divorce. It didn't end with confession. It ended with transformation, and not everyone transformed equally. And that's why, years later, people are still talking. The conversation didn't stop when the cameras did. Long after episodes aired, Melody Holt, Martell Holt, and Arionne Curry continued to live with the aftermath in real time. Social media became an extension of the show, one without producers, edits, or limits. Every post, every caption, every moment of silence was analyzed as if it were evidence in an ongoing trial. Fans weren't just watching anymore, they were participating. Melody's restraint became one of her most powerful statements. While many expected her to lash out or publicly dismantle the narrative piece by piece, she didn't. Instead, she let time do the work. Her growth appeared in subtle ways: new ventures, a calmer presence, and a visible shift in priorities. Viewers began to notice that the less she explained herself, the more respect she gained. Silence, in her case, became strength. Arionne Curry's experience unfolded very differently. The internet rarely allows nuance, and once she was labeled, it was nearly impossible to escape it. No matter how she framed her story, whether as honesty, closure, or self-defense, it was filtered through public anger. Some audiences believed she deserved empathy, arguing that manipulation and secrecy often silence women in these situations. Others felt her continued commentary kept reopening wounds that needed to close. The truth is, once a story becomes public, intention no longer controls impact. Martell Holt remained at the center of every version of the narrative, even when he wasn't speaking. His past words, actions, and contradictions continued to resurface, shaping how audiences interpreted everything connected to him. Attempts at humor or confidence were often met with skepticism. For many viewers, the issue was no longer the affair, it was the refusal to fully confront its consequences. What made this situation especially difficult was the way reality TV blurs real pain with entertainment. Emotional moments were replayed for ratings, confessions were turned into cliffhangers, healing was delayed by production schedules. Melody's heartbreak didn't get time to rest, it had to perform. Arionne's truth didn't get space, it had to defend itself. And Martell's accountability often felt optional. Over time, fans began asking deeper questions. Why are women expected to either forgive quietly or fight endlessly? Why does accountability fade faster for men? And why does growth only get recognized when it's calm, polished, and convenient for viewers? Melody's evolution answered some of those questions without words. She didn't rebuild to prove anyone wrong, she rebuilt because she had to survive. Her journey became less about what happened to her and more about what she chose afterward. That shift changed how many people viewed her, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a woman who refused to be defined by it. Arionne's story remains unresolved in the public eye. She exists in the uncomfortable space between truth and perception, where even honesty is questioned. Whether people agree with her or not, her reality serves as a reminder that speaking up doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it brings permanent judgment. And Martell's role, intentionally or not, became symbolic of a larger issue. When accountability is delayed or diluted, damage spreads outward. Relationships end, reputations fracture, and children grow up surrounded by narratives they didn't choose. This isn't just a love and marriage Huntsville storyline. It's a reflection of how modern audiences consume pain. We demand access, we demand explanations, but rarely do we allow space for healing without commentary. In the end, the most important truth may be this: not everyone gets closure, not everyone gets redemption, but everyone lives with the consequences. And that's why this story still matters, because it reminds us that behind every headline, every episode, and every opinion, real lives continue long after the cameras stop rolling.